Hi everyone, my name is Patrick Teahan, Licsw, and I am a childhood trauma specialist. I work with adults who have been through childhood trauma, and most of the people that come to me are seeking that they're curious about whether to look at their childhood, or they really know that something was really off. So I wanted to make this video and cover two things, to really cover what is childhood trauma, and the other piece is how is seeing a trauma specialist different than general talk therapy? So let's dive into the first question. What is childhood trauma? Trauma can be defined, or abuse can be defined, as growing up with parents who were less than nurturing. Anything less than nurturing is abusive. That when you really think about a child's development and the child's emotional needs, even into the adolescent years, from infancy to adolescence and beyond, were emotional needs met. So when we think about what kinds of families would be dysfunctional families, that's where it gets a little bit kind of confusing. Some people get to me and they come from what I call the blatant family, where it's blatantly abusive, where there's really no question at all about whether that was traumatic or not. It's like deep emotional abuse, deep sexual abuse, deep physical abuse, rage, mental illness, deep narcissism or personality disorders, very unsafe environments, and the person doesn't necessarily have to spend time asking how bad it was. They just inherently know. And there's another side to the spectrum, is what I call the tricky family, which is not that, but a tricky family is where the trauma survivor comes from a family where everything looks good on paper. And what I mean by that is, basically like everything can be provided for, basic needs are kind of met. What I mean by that is like there's no extreme poverty, things are provided, things are consistent. But let's just say that mom and dad should be divorced, or that they are in a severe codependent relationship, or that the family doesn't know how to do emotions, or there's deep criticism. It's actually harder, I find, for the client who comes from a tricky family to really be kind of searching between, and this is a general question about what we're doing in this work, is a question about, am I just inherently deeply flawed, or did I come from a family system that was damaging? That's a question that we're always kind of coming back to. So the person coming from a tricky family, often is wrestling with themselves in almost a way, thinking that it just must be me, I just must be a flawed human being. And then when we really kind of look at the family system and how the family operated, it's evident that it wasn't emotionally safe growing up, even though that basic needs were provided. Some other examples of a tricky family, like maybe either mom and dad has a secret addiction going on, or there's infidelity. So we have the blatant family and we have the tricky family. And it's really interesting in a way that regardless of what kind of family you come from, the symptoms are identical. What I mean by that is, like, there's depression, there's anxiety, there's an emotional stuckness, there can be feeling numb and shut down and out of your body, there can be a feeling of being really kind of activated and up. Sometimes I ask people, if you were a car engine, would you idle low, medium, or high? And a lot of people say high, meaning it tells me that they might be in a bit of hypervigilance. So where was I? We were talking about blatant family and a tricky family, the symptoms being the same. And one big piece that's really consistent about the intimacy, and I don't necessarily mean sexual intimacy, is that regardless of what family the client comes from, they generally have a really hard time finding a partner that's emotionally available, or they're really caught in a pattern of dating a certain type of person, or they're married to somebody who is sort of really stuck, or maybe represents something like one of their parents. So that's what I mean about the symptoms being the same and coming from the two types of family. And that's not just a black and white thing, that blatant tricky family is on a spectrum. So what was the other question? The other question is how is doing trauma work different than general talk therapy? Well, as a specialist, the work that I do is very agenda focused, that I do specific tools for every client that comes in with me, we do the childhood trauma tools. We do something like called the genogram, which is looking at your family tree of dysfunction. We do a piece of work called the family rules, where we spend time about how there were really big rules growing up, like don't trust, don't talk about it, it's your fault things go wrong, and we see how those rules developed in childhood because of mom and dad, and we see how they're playing out in the person's present. We also have an amazing tool called dialoguing, where each client that comes to me is that we're trying to get the client to reparent themselves, and in the dialoguing process where there's actually sort of a conversation going on. You can Google dialoguing, it's left hand, right hand, dominant hand, not dominant hand work, and those get associated with parts of the brain where the brain is actually trying to rewire, like reassociate, like where an example in dialoguing, let's say if a client come in really triggered by somebody at work, and in a dialogue the adult part of us might say, tell me how you feel about Bob from accounting, because I sensed that you were upset at him this morning. And it's amazing when we kind of put the pen in our non-dominant hand and have our inner child answer. Inner child might sort of say, I really don't like him. He doesn't like me. He's scary. And the adult part of us, that seems like kind of a crazy example, but the adult part of us can then take care of our emotions and also figure out where that trigger would be coming from in childhood. Maybe Bob from accounting is kind of like sort of flat and critical, maybe like dad was. So there's going to be sort of an association there. And what I love about dialoguing is it's sort of rewiring the brain to really change the way we feel about the present and to process the past. So we're kind of hitting two birds with one stone there. So how it's different than general talk therapy is that, we do talk about, the client will come in and tell me about problems in their present life, but we're always trying to relate it to childhood and then figure out a way where the adult can have a different experience or reclaim something. A lot of my clients are working on dating programs. A lot of my clients are working on trying to unstuck and sort of get a better job. A lot of my clients are trying to find the intimacy that they need with their partners or need help parenting their own children, especially when they kind of were brought up in a really dysfunctional environment. Most people are overly hard on themselves when they have children because they don't want to be like mom and dad. And an interesting piece about trauma work is I find that most of us we're trying desperately to not be like our parents, and we can really exhaust ourselves in that process, and we tend to be black and white thinking about that. Hopefully that makes sense. So my practice is in Arlington, Massachusetts. I do a lot of this work in a group format, which is another tool, was different than general talk therapy. And coming back to general talk therapy is more present focused, where this work is past focus and how it relates to the present. We're really looking at a person's past and spending time at it. Because we're coming back to Bob from accounting, it's not about Bob from accounting. We're having a body memory about what it was like to feel criticized, or to be with someone who couldn't be direct, or to be around someone who was extremely moody. And I really love what I do. And I'll throw some information up on the screen here. And that most of the work I do is in individual and couples, but where it really takes off is doing this work in a group format, and I'll do another video about that. If you have any questions, my email address is pgt.licsw@gmail.com. Phone number is 617-767-8281. The website is patrickteahantherapy.com. Hope you're having a great day, and hopefully this was helpful, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.